What happens when a candy factory CEO puts on a hairnet and apron just to find out his workers can't even sit for 5 minutes? Mason Keller had inherited the candy company from his father 2 years ago. 17 locations across 5 states, each one churning out sweet goods for grocery stores, gas stations, and Halloween aisles. Mason was 38, sharp and business-trained, but lately he'd felt like a stranger to the company that bore his family name. He sat in his office staring at another stiff report. Productivity slightly down at Site 11, it read. Same as last month, same as the month before. The numbers were vague, no real explanations, no real solutions, just bar graphs. "I'm done with these filtered updates," he muttered, standing up. "I want to see it myself." Site 11 was a mid-sized factory in Indiana Mason had never visited. Most of the workers had never met the CEO. With so many locations and a middle management layer between him and the floor, it was easy to stay invisible. He called his assistant. "Book me a flight to Indianapolis. I'm going to work a floor shift." He went in as Matt, a new trainee hired through a staffing agency. They gave him steel-toe boots, a white hairnet, and a neon yellow vest. His beard was trimmed, glasses on, voice a little deeper than usual. No one suspected a thing. His first day started at 6 o'clock a.m. sharp. The production floor smelled like sugar and warm chocolate. Machines hummed, wrappers crinkled, and conveyor belts rolled nonstop. Mason was assigned to a packing line slotting caramel bars into boxes beside a woman named Naomi Ellers. She looked to be in her late 40s with tired eyes but a kind smile. "First day?" she asked, taping up a box. "Yeah," Mason said, lifting a tray. "Matt, Naomi, just keep your head down, don't talk too much, and don't ask for breaks." He raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Naomi glanced toward the supervisor's station. A tall man in a crisp polo shirt stood there, arms crossed, watching everyone like a hawk. "That's Vince," she said quietly. "He thinks breaks are for the weak." Mason frowned. "Isn't there a schedule?" "There is. We're supposed to get one 15-minute break every 4 hours, but Vince, he forgets, or he says the line's too backed up. If you ask more than once, you get written up." Mason watched Vince for the next hour. Sure enough, workers looked nervous even glancing toward the break room. Twice, Mason saw Naomi glance at the clock and then keep working past the 4-hour mark. At noon, Mason's lower back ached. He hadn't sat down once. The floor was loud, the heat stifling. Naomi wiped sweat from her brow and kept going. He leaned over. "How long you been here?" 8 years. "No promotion," she shook her head. "I've trained 6 people who got promoted. They were younger, louder." She paused. "I got 2 kids. I just need the job." Mason felt something twist in his gut. He nodded and kept working. At 2 o'clock p.m., a younger worker, maybe 19, named Troy, leaned on the machine and whispered, "Hey, Vince, can I take my break now? My legs are killing me." Vince didn't even look up. "You take your break when I say, not when your legs say." Troy's eyes dropped. "Yes, sir." Mason clenched his jaw. That wasn't just wrong. It was illegal. Later that afternoon, Mason caught a moment alone with Naomi near the loading dock. He does that often, almost every day. He says he's keeping us efficient. "Why don't people report it?" Naomi gave a dry laugh. "To who?" "The district managers, his college buddy, and HR's in Chicago. Takes them 2 weeks just to return a call." Mason walked back onto the floor, heart pounding. This wasn't a leadership failure. This was neglect, and it was happening under his name. He worked the rest of the shift quietly, observing. Naomi helped him adjust his gloves during a jam. Troy tried teaching him how to tape faster. These people were good. Honest. They deserved better. Mason left the building at 6:15 p.m., exhausted and furious. He sat in his rental car staring at his hands. They're afraid to even sit down. He looked back at the building, fists tight. Tomorrow they'd see what happened when the real boss showed up. The next morning, Mason returned to Site 11 before dawn, this time through the front entrance. He wore a tailored navy suit and carried a leather folder tucked under his arm. The security guard at the front desk did a double take. "You're Mason Keller, CEO." The guard's eyes widened. He fumbled for the visitor log. Of course, sir. Welcome. Do you need someone to walk you to? No. I know the way. Mason passed the break room, the vending machines humming in the quiet corridor. At 5:55 a.m., he pushed through the double doors onto the production floor. The shift hadn't started yet, but workers were trickling in, tying aprons, checking gloves, punching in. Naomi was already at her station, stretching her shoulder with a quiet, practiced motion. When she saw him, she froze mid-motion. Her eyes darted to his suit. She looked stunned. Mason gave her a small nod. Good morning, Naomi, she blinked. You're him? I am. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. He stepped past her and headed straight toward the supervisor's station. Vince stood at the panel, clipboard in hand, issuing instructions to a technician. He didn't notice Mason until he was nearly beside him. Morning, Mason said evenly. Vince turned. His brow furrowed as he took in the suit, then recognition hit. Mr. Keller, sir, I wasn't told you were visiting. I know, that was the point. Vince straightened. Of course. If I'd known, we'd have made preparations. I didn't come for a tour, Mason said. He looked around. Do you usually start the day without a team huddle? We do a quick check-in, station by station, less wasted time. I'll be addressing the team now. Call everyone over. Vince hesitated as if unsure whether Mason was serious. Then he cleared his throat and barked, all staff gather near line 2. Now, about 24 workers assembled. Most looked confused, others curious. Troy stood near the back, arms crossed, eyes cautious. Naomi kept her hands clasped tightly in front of her apron. The room fell quiet. Mason waited until the last person stopped moving, then he stepped forward. Good morning. I'm Mason Keller, CEO of Keller Suites. I've owned this company since my father passed it on 2 years ago. Until yesterday, I thought I understood what was happening inside our factories. He paused. Turns out I didn't. A murmur passed through the group. I came here undercover. I worked alongside you, boxed caramels with you, stood on the line for 12 hours like you do every day. And I saw what I wasn't supposed to see. He turned his head toward Vince. I saw workers afraid to sit down. I saw people denied their legal breaks. I saw pain, fatigue, and silence where there should have been structure and respect. Vince shifted uncomfortably. I assure you, sir, productivity has been high. This isn't about productivity, Mason snapped, his voice sharper now. It's about dignity. He faced the team again. You deserve to take a break without begging for it. You deserve supervisors who respect labor laws. And you deserve leadership that listens. Troy raised his hand slowly. Are things going to change, or is this just for show? Mason met his gaze. They're going to change, starting today. He stepped back, voice calm but firm. Effective immediately, Vince is relieved of his position. The factory went completely still. Vince stared, stunned. Sir, I've been here 9 years, and you've used those years to build fear, not leadership. I won't defend that. You can collect your things. HR will contact you by noon. Vince stood frozen a moment longer, then turned and walked off the floor, eyes burning. Mason turned back to the workers. Starting this afternoon, an interim supervisor from our compliance team will oversee shifts. Your break schedule will be enforced to the letter. Any retaliation for speaking up ends now. If it doesn't, my number will be posted in the break room. A shiver of movement passed through the group, relief, disbelief, cautious hope. He gave a small nod. That's all for now, and Naomi, she looked up quickly. Come see me in the office at 10. She gave a small, uncertain nod. As the workers returned to their stations, Mason walked to the back office. The factory manager, Ken, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, was waiting. He'd been in the role for decades but rarely intervened on floor-level issues. You knew about Vince's behavior? Mason asked, shutting the door behind him. Ken hesitated. I heard things. Nothing concrete. Vince kept numbers solid. I figured. You figured wrong. From now on, I want weekly reports from this site, but not just production numbers. I want worker feedback, too, anonymous and raw. Ken nodded slowly. Understood. At 10 o'clock sharp, Naomi stepped into the office. Her hands were clean, her apron folded under one arm. She looked unsure what to expect. You've been here 8 years, Mason said, gesturing for her to sit. She nodded. You ever applied for a lead position? Twice, she said. Didn't get interviews either time. He looked through her file briefly. No disciplinary actions, consistent performance, peer training notes. You trained new hires all the time. I don't mind doing it. You should be paid for it. She didn't reply. I'm offering you an official floor lead position. Same shift but with authority to train, approve breaks, and escalate any mistreatment. You'll report directly to the new supervisor and eventually we'll evaluate you for a permanent leadership role. Naomi's eyes widened. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me fix what I let break. She nodded slowly. I'll do my best. I believe you. She stood, shook his hand, and left. After lunch, Mason walked the floor again. He saw workers watching him differently now, less guarded, more open. A young woman at the end of the line gave a small nod as he passed. Troy lifted one hand slightly, a quiet gesture of thanks. He paused near the break room. Inside, for the first time, it wasn't empty. 3 workers sat at the table, sipping water, laughing softly. One had their feet up on a chair, eyes closed. Mason turned away and kept walking. By Thursday, the ripple effects of Mason's visit were starting to show. The interim supervisor, a quiet but firm compliance officer named Darlene, had stepped in without ceremony. She didn't bark orders or pace like Vince had. Instead, she rotated between lines, clipboard in hand, asking questions and actually listening to the answers. She didn't interrupt. She didn't posture. She just observed, wrote, and followed up. Mason stayed on site 3 more days, moving between the factory floor, the front offices, and the break room. His presence had the odd effect of both unsettling and energizing people. Some looked away when he passed. Others, like Troy, began to approach him between shifts with questions that had clearly been bottled up for months. Why is the training so rushed? Troy asked during a short afternoon pause near the shipping dock. We get new folks every other week and they're barely shown anything before they're thrown on a line. Who trains them? Mason asked. Used to be Naomi mostly, but she's pulled in too many directions now. Mason nodded. We'll fix that. He didn't offer a timeline, he didn't overpromise. Back in the small upstairs office, he pulled up the staffing reports. The turnover rate at Site 11 was nearly double the company average. Exit interviews were sparse, and most listed personal reasons or relocation as causes. But Mason had seen the truth now. People weren't leaving because of life changes. They were burning out. He called the regional HR manager in Chicago. How often are you checking in with floor staff at Site 11? There was a pause. Quarterly, unless there's a complaint raised. There have been complaints, they just aren't reaching you. I can look into that. No, Mason said, you'll do more than look, you'll be here Monday in person. Sit down with every shift lead and come back to me with a report by end of day. She agreed, cautiously. That afternoon, Mason walked the perimeter of the production floor. Near the far end, behind the refrigeration units, he found a small utility area where 2 younger employees were stacking shipping boxes. Hey, he said. They looked up. One of them, a wiry kid with a buzz cut and a nervous glance, stepped back instinctively. The other, a young woman with short braids and a steady gaze, stayed where she was. I'm not here to check your speed, Mason said. Just trying to understand how things work back here. The woman nodded. We're the overflow team. When the line gets backed up, we repackage and label whatever's delayed. How often does that happen? Lately, she shrugged. Every day. Because of demand, because the machines jam, the guy said, and no one wants to call maintenance unless it's totally dead. They say delays make the numbers look worse, so we just fight through it. Mason frowned. Who says that? Used to be Vince. But some of the line leads are the same way. They act like asking for help is weakness. The woman added, also, we're not allowed to call maintenance directly. Only supervisors can. Why, chain of command, the guy muttered. Mason didn't respond. He just nodded once and walked away, making a note on his phone. At the end of the shift, he stepped into the main floor again and asked to speak with the 3 shift leads still in place from before his visit. They met in a side hallway, away from the machines. "Let's talk about maintenance," he said. "Why aren't issues being reported right away?" One of the leads, a lanky man with thinning hair and a clipboard tucked under his arm, rubbed the back of his neck. "We're expected to keep things moving. If we call tech support too often, it slows down the line. Then we get flagged in the reports." "Flagged by who?" He hesitated. "Used to be Vince, but the culture stuck." Mason looked at the others. "Anyone else want to speak honestly?" A woman in her 30s with an exhausted look on her face finally spoke. "It's not that we don't care. It's that no one's ever made it clear what matters more, speed or sustainability, so we assume it's speed." Mason nodded once. "That ends now. Starting tomorrow, any malfunction gets reported immediately. No bottlenecks, no judgment. I'll deal with the numbers." "You deal with safety and reliability," he paused. "And if I find out anyone's discouraging reports or punishing delays, they'll be out. No warnings. We're not gambling with people's safety to protect a spreadsheet." They nodded slowly. The lanky man looked away. In the break room the next morning, Mason caught Naomi reviewing shift schedules with 2 new hires. Her posture had changed. She stood straighter now, but not out of pride, out of responsibility. She was carrying more, and it showed. "You've taken on a lot," Mason said after the trainees left. "I'm managing," she said. "Barely," he gestured to the schedule. "You shouldn't have to juggle training and production oversight alone." "I've been asking for an assistant lead for over a year," she said without bitterness. "Never got a response." "You'll have one by next week," she nodded quietly. Later that afternoon, Mason received an internal email from Darlene. The subject line read, "Supervisor Incident Friday Shift." He opened it and read the attached summary. Apparently, one of the remaining line leads, a man named Curtis, had been overheard mocking a Hispanic employee's accent during instructions. When confronted, he claimed it was just a joke and that everyone talks like that sometimes. Mason didn't hesitate. He walked directly to the supervisor station and asked Curtis to step aside. "You made a comment about someone's accent yesterday," Curtis fidgeted. "It was harmless, just joking around." "Did they laugh?" "They didn't seem upset." "That's not a defense." Mason's expression hardened. "You're done here. Clear out your locker." "What? Over that? It was nothing." "If you can't work without mocking your team, you don't belong in a leadership role or in this company." Curtis left, muttering under his breath. Mason didn't flinch. When he returned to the floor, a few workers had clearly heard about the firing. There was no applause, no whispers. Just a quiet sense of notice someone was actually paying attention. That night, Mason sat in the dim upstairs office long after most of the staff had gone home. He reviewed the latest staffing schedule. There were still gaps. Still too much strain on the leads, but progress was visible. He tapped his pen against the desk, then made a decision. The next morning, he asked Darlene to begin identifying 3 employees from the floor who could be trained into assistant roles. Not for show, not temporarily, but as a real investment. "Pick people who have earned respect, not just the loudest voices," he said. She nodded. "I already have a few in mind." As she left, Mason looked out the window at the factory floor below. The machines were running again, steady and loud. But now the rhythm felt different, not faster, not slower, just steadier. When the break bell rang, he saw Naomi sit down at a table with 2 other workers. They were talking, not whispering, just talking. He turned back to his desk, pulled out a blank notepad, and began to write. By the following Monday, Site 11 felt different, not fixed, not thriving, but steadier. Some of the tension had lifted, like a rubber band no longer pulled to the point of snapping. Mason arrived before sunrise again, this time with no disguise, no secrecy. He wore a plain gray button-down and jeans enough to show he was still the boss, but not above the floor. He stood near the time clock and nodded to each employee as they came in. Troy gave a cautious wave. "Didn't expect you back this week." "I said I wanted to learn," Mason replied. "Still true." Inside, the air carried the same mix of sugar and machine oil, but the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations were happening in small clusters. Workers were moving faster, not out of pressure, but out of rhythm. They weren't glancing toward the supervisor station every few minutes anymore. They were watching the line itself, keeping pace with the product. Mason met with Darlene in the upstairs office just after first break. "I've narrowed it down to 5 candidates we can train into assistant leads," she said, placing a folder on the desk. "All internal. 3 from production, 2 from packaging. All respected, consistent, and willing." He flipped through the pages. "Anyone stand out, Lucia Gomez," she said. "Quiet but steady. She's been the one organizing shift coverage whenever someone calls out. She's been doing the job unofficially for a year." Mason nodded. "Move her into training." "What about Naomi? She's already running too lean. Don't add more to her plate. Pair Lucia with one of the new hires. Let her build from the ground up." Darlene hesitated, then added, "There's still one issue, the staffing agency we've been using. Turns out they've been underpaying temp workers compared to our full-time floor rate by almost $3 an hour." Mason's expression hardened. "Did they disclose that?" Buried in fine print. "Technically not illegal, but terminate the contract. Today. Any current agency hires get absorbed directly. Back pay them the difference." Darlene nodded once and left the room. Later that afternoon, Mason walked the corridor behind the cold storage area, where 2 new hires were sorting damaged boxes. One of them, a tall man with calloused hands and a stitched name tag that read Rashad, was carefully stacking product that had been flagged for rewrapping. "Where do these end up?" Mason asked. "Usually we relabel and send them out on the next truck. As long as the seal's unbroken." "Who taught you that, Lucia?" he said. "She said if the candy's good, don't waste it, just be honest in the label." Mason nodded. "How long you been here?" 5 days. "Best job I've had in a while. You feel trained." "More than I expected to." "Naomi walked me through the safety stuff herself. Said she didn't want anyone working blind." "Where'd you work before this?" "Warehouse outside Chicago. Left when I got written up for icing my knee during shift. They said it made me look idle." Mason didn't say anything. He just looked down at the man's knee brace, wrapped tight beneath his jeans. "Lucia see that?" he asked. "She told me to do rotations that don't put pressure on it, said pain's not a weakness." Mason walked away quietly. At 4:30, he met with the factory manager Ken in the maintenance bay, where a technician had just finished retooling one of the wrapping machines. "You asked for more transparency," Ken said. "Here's your backlog report, real numbers, no filters." Mason scanned the sheet. 22 jam reports in the last 8 days, correct. "And how many were escalated before it stopped the line?" Ken didn't answer immediately. Eventually, he said, 5. Mason folded the paper. "From now on, I want a maintenance check scheduled every 3rd shift. Rotation-based, not complaint-based. Preventative, not reactive." Ken nodded. "Understood. And no more waiting for breakdowns to justify repairs." That ends. That evening, Mason returned to the break room, where Naomi was sitting with her daughter, a high schooler who had come by to drop off dinner. They were talking in low voices, a paper bag between them. Mason paused nearby. Naomi noticed and waved him over. "You've met Mia?" she asked. "Not yet," Mason said, sitting down. "Nice to meet you." "Same," Mia said. "Mom says you're the reason she's finally getting sleep." Mason gave a small smile. "She's the reason things are getting better. I just got out of the way." Naomi looked at him. "You staying long?" "Tomorrow's my last day here, but I'll be back regularly, no more disappearing act." She nodded, then asked, "Why'd you come down in the first place?" He thought about it. "Because I stopped trusting reports, and because I forgot what it means to have your name on something. This place carries mine, I had to see what that meant." Before he left that night, Mason walked the floor one last time. The evening crew was winding down. A few stragglers wrapped up final boxes. Over by the loading dock, someone was sweeping not because they were told to, but because the job wasn't done yet. He stopped near the packing line and watched the caramel bars roll past. Same machines. Same product. But now the people around them weren't shrinking to fit the system. The system was adjusting to fit the people. The next morning, he gathered the full day shift before production started. No speech this time, just a few direct words. This week didn't fix everything, but it started something. And I'm not walking away from it. He looked at Troy, then Lucia, then Naomi. From here on out, if something's broken, speak. If someone's mistreated, say it. If leadership doesn't listen, call me. He handed Darlene a laminated sheet. It listed a direct line, his personal email, and a rotating monthly visit schedule. No one clapped. But no one looked away either. After the shift began, Mason walked out through the same doors he'd entered 5 days earlier, back straight. No disguise, no distance. Outside, the sun was rising. He got into the car and drove north toward the airport. As he passed the edge of the facility, he saw a delivery truck pulling in. On the side, in bold red letters, it read, "Keller Sweets Made with Care." For the first time in a long time, Mason believed those words. Because now they weren't just a slogan, they were a promise, and he intended to keep it.